And welcome today to Dr. Carol's Couch. This edition is going to be very, very interesting, very timely, and very important. It's called While Everyone's Looking for Nancy Guthrie, Iran is Threatening World War III. Now, everyone is sort of caught up in trying to find out who abducted Nancy Guthrie, why, of course, now the latest thing is that the video came out of someone at her door, ripping off the camera. So it's all very exciting, and it's all very easy to think about, easier to think about than what's going on in the world on a larger scale. Now I myself am guilty of being being mesmerized by the Nancy Guthrie abduction because it's getting curiouser and curiouser. However, I am also very much involved in what is happening in Iran and what is happening in a more general sense in the world that is making us closer to World War III than we ever have been before. In fact, the doomsday clock, we are closer to doomsday than we ever have been before. So, um, I am very happy to be able to bring to you two guests who can speak to this whole scenario, not Nancy Guthrie, but the whole World War III and the world coming to an end scenario. Um, and they are Shirin Nariman, and she is a former political prisoner from Iran. She is currently a human rights advocate and entrepreneur. At just 15 years old, during the 1979 Iranian Revolution, she became involved in pro-democracy activities and supported the People's Mojahedin organization of Iran. Less than 2 years later, she was arrested for her activism, becoming one of the youngest political prisoners of her time and enduring severe torture in Evin prison. Her case drew international attention and intervention from the Red Cross. Now, also on the show today is Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis. He is retired. He's a retired U.S. Army lieutenant. He has he's served in the Pentagon since 1993, if not before. You'll correct me, Bob. Um, he went to the U.S. Military Academy, of course, the Naval Postgraduate School, the Command and General Staff College, the Defense Language School, and the Army War College's strategy course. And when he got out at 18 years old, he then joined the Pentagon. um, and including in 1993 when he was in the group. This is very interesting. We have to talk about this too. He was in the group that wrote the now abandoned policy on homosexuals in the military, known as Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He remains a senior fellow for national security at the Pentagon. And he also, you may have seen him on Fox as a military analyst. He's written 11 published books, and his most recent one is AI for Mankind's Future. So after we hear about how World War III is going to be starting, probably with Iran, you can tell us about how AI is going to save us. So so let's start with Shirin. Tell us about what that was like when being a prisoner in Iran. I can't think of I mean that it's of course chilling to think about. And you were just 16 when that happened?
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here with you and your honored guest. Yes, I was 16 and a half. I was in my senior year at high school when I was arrested at home, just for being supportive of People's of Mujahideen organization in Iran, which is PMI. And I was in prison for 2 years. And after 2 years, I was very lucky that I was released. And a few years later, I landed in America as a refugee.
Wow. What was it like in the prison?
Well, prison it's not a fun place to be. Unfortunately, I had to force to become adult and also to become strong, going through everything that we had to go through. It wasn't just the physical punishments that we received, or tortures anytime you were taken for interrogation, or for any other reason they would attack the prison sections and they would beat up everyone and then they leave. Things that we hear right now even is happening in Iran. And I was held in Evin prison. It's a notorious prison that was built by the king of Iran, Shah of Iran, the previous monarchy, and that he built it for uh, specifically for political prisoners. So unfortunately, the same prison was used during Shah, and now it's being used during Ayatollah. So on a daily basis, you had to face different things. In the mornings, they would call out a list, and if your name was in there, that meant that you were taken for interrogation, and that meant that a minimum was to just receive some lashes in your
Mm.
back, in your, feet, So it was torture. You knew that in the morning, if they call you, you had
Mm.
to get ready for torture. And just not think about the moments that you were waiting and you could hear other people
Huh.
torture, they're crying or yelling, or um, just hearing it, and also smell the smell of blood, and
Mm.
everything that it comes with it. And in the afternoon, before sunset, they would call out a list, and that meant that those people were taken for execution. So,
Oh,
and
wow.
they would tell them to pick up your stuff. So we knew that those people are called out to be executed, and just saying goodbye, just every afternoon, imagine that that was a routine. And then
Huh.
back then they used the firing squad, so right behind the walls of Evin prison they would execute people, and then they would use the coup de grace, which is the last shot on the head, and that's how we knew how many people were executed. So we would count how many shots did we hear. And I think the most difficult part was when we said goodbye to our friends or relatives. There were sisters that they said goodbye to each other,
Ah,
mothers and daughters, they were friends. In many occasions, I had to say goodbye to my own friends and promising them that I would never forget, and I will continue what I'm doing right now.
wow. Um, was there a way that you could protect yourself from either the torture or the execution? Like, were there certain things, if you did this, then you got executed? I mean, did you know what it was that you
Uh,
weren't supposed to do?
unless you really cooperate with them and disclose a lot of information that
Oh,
could
uh-huh.
trigger, other people safety, or well-being. I had a girl that for a few weeks we were together. She was 13 years old and I was 17. So imagine that children helping each other, and she was held and tortured for her brothers. They wanted to know
Oh,
where her brothers were. The only thing I know about her it was Zahra. She didn't even tell me her last name. And also at the time, all of us in prison, we never asked about our names, our last names, or families, friends, none of that, because that could have been become a point that it would bring more issues with it and could jeopardize your well-being anyway. But she was executed at
huh.
just in a few weeks. Yes.
Oh, wow. 13. Okay. Um, Lieutenant McGinnis, do you want me to call you Lieutenant McGinnis or Bob, or what would you like me to call you?
Yeah, Dr. Carroll, it's more appropriate to call me Colonel McGinnis.
Colonel.
I'm a lieutenant colonel by retirement, but you refer to me as a colonel or
Oh,
Bob. I like
okay.
Bob, by the way.
Okay. Sorry about the Colonel part. Okay. Would you like to comment on what Shireen has said so far?
You know, the atrocities that were committed not only against her, but other people in those prisons under authoritarians is unfortunate that we've seen this elsewhere in the world as well. Certainly in China, we see it. The Russians, we obviously we saw it. Prior to the end of World War II. We see it today in Nigeria as they're killing Christians left and right and elsewhere. So, these atrocities we should not tolerate as civilized people. But it's when you allow these fanatics to run governments and to have power. They do some pretty dastardly things. I know the closest I've been to Iran is next door in Iraq, and I saw some of the stuff that Saddam Hussein had done to his own people. And so, what Sharon is talking about, I'm not surprised.
Well, let me start with you asking about the current situation. Like why don't you lay it out for us for people who haven't been following it. I just want to say for both of you, just since 9/11, I became what I call the terrorist therapist. I don't do therapy for terrorists, although I would if I were asked by the Pentagon. But I help people cope with terrorism, first from Americans from 9/11, and then in France and in London and in Manchester, and then most recently, since October 7th, in Israel. Um, and so, but also I have a podcast called The Terrorist Therapist Show. And also what I do is what I have been doing since almost 9/11, for years and years, warning people about how it's not a one and done thing, that terrorists are, their plan is to wipe out, is to take over the world like they once did. And to make everybody well, first of all, to kill all the infidels, and then to make other people live under Sharia law and so on, pay the jizya tax and so on. Um, so I am very interested in all of this, and and can't wait for us to. I would like to hear your what you have to say about the current situation. So, Bob, since you're on the on camera here, why don't you start with that and lay out where things are? I mean, do you know what's going to be happening tomorrow as far as the armada that is at Iran's door?
Well, certainly President Trump has built up quite an armada there. We have already in place 19 locations where our troops are in 8 different countries, and maybe in the neighborhood of 50,000 sailors, Marines, soldiers, airmen in the vicinity. We have a host of F-15s, F-18s, a lot of anti-ballistic missile capability that, of course, were used this past summer with the Iranian assaults on Israel. So we have a lot of capability. Now, the question, of course, is everybody likes to ask is whether or not Donald Trump's going to use these against the Iranian mullahs to change regime. And I'm somewhat skeptical that that's going to happen. I think that though he's expressed great sympathy, he's condemned the Iranian regime. He encourages freedom seekers, and he will continue to put pressure on the regime through sanctions and a variety of other mechanisms. However, I do not believe that the United States, much less Donald Trump, are prepared to go in on the ground, which would be something tantamount to what we did back in 2003 against the Iraqis. And I don't see that happening. Yeah, Donald Trump is not George W. Bush, nor does he have a Dick Cheney on his side that is encouraging that sort of behavior. So I don't think that's going to happen. Now, of course, there are no negotiations in Oman across the Gulf. They're talking about a host of things. Of course, the Iranians only want to talk about maintaining their nuclear capability. It doesn't make any sense to people that understand nuclear weapons or a nuclear program why you would have a stockpile of 60% enriched uranium when, really for X-rays and all medical reasons, you only need about a 3% enrichment. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, the ballistic missiles, we understand they want those for defense purposes, but also they threaten their neighbors, and they've been very um, prolific in their use of those against, of course, Israel, but they've used them against the U.S. forces in Iraq and other places as well. So you have these issues now. Sharon, I'm sure is going to, can talk to us about all the issues, the economic issues, the horrid human rights issues that she's already, addressed. There are, there's a loss of confidence in the leadership. Clearly, Israel's taken out a bunch of high-ranking generals and nuclear scientists. But at the end of the day, Dr. Carole, they're not going to give up their nuclear program. They're not going to give up their missiles. Um, and unless there is an organic effort to overturn within, the U.S. is not about to invade Iran to, cause another regional, much less global war. Now, that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen, but I don't think that that's the intent of Donald Trump, much less those at the Pentagon. So, that's my take at this point. I'll be glad to respond elsewhere.
Okay. All right, that's great. And so when we come back, we will have Shirin respond to that, like what the Iranian people really want. So stay tuned. You're listening to Dr. Carole's Couch, and we'll be right back. And welcome back to Dr. Carole's Couch, where we're talking today about while everyone's looking for Nancy Guthrie, Iran is threatening World War III. And I have two honorable guests to talking about this from two different perspectives. First of all, Shirin Nariman and Colonel Robert McGinnis, retired Colonel Robert McGinnis. And we were just, Robert just, described for us the current state of affairs in terms of the outside, like in terms of the U.S. position. Now, Shirin, why don't you tell us about what the people are really thinking in Iran?
Well, I think we saw it very well in end of the last year and beginning of this year of the uprising that was happening inside of Iran. People are clearly are fed up with this regime and they're done with this regime. Unfortunately, in 2 nights, the Iranian regime managed to kill many, many lives. We still don't know the correct estimate. But one thing that I think we all have learned about Iranian regime is that Iranian regime is about playing games and buying times. And we have heard it repeatedly from the Iranian officials and also like Larijani or Ghalibaf, different people, or in the parliament that we are going to get the atomic bomb. Iran is not going to give up its ambition to have the atomic bomb because they know if they have that, the whole world needs to deal with them and tolerate them. And we have seen how Iranian regime can be dangerous through its proxies around the world. It's not just Iranian people that suffer now. People have suffered in the Middle East, and they have also suffered from terrorist attacks that Iranian regime were behind it in Europe, in America, everywhere. So I think in past for decades, always, no matter who sat in the White House, they didn't make the strong decision that, to say no to the regime and close all the doors to the regime. I understand that, there were many maybe discussion or many geopolitical things that was happening that the decision was always let's talk to the regime and let's change the behavior of this regime. And that is the problem. You cannot change the behavior of a terrorist entity. And we all know that Iranian regime is a terrorist entity.
Right.
So what we need is a strong policies to be built around the Iranian regime. Now that the whole world has seen Iranian people are fed up and they want the regime change, and the regime change is going to happen this year. I have no doubt about it. The regime will change. People are angry and now they are hurt. This might be just a little bit of silent, quiet time, but it will come back, and this time it's going to be really, I think, in my view, it's going to be bloody because people already are talking about taking revenge of the regime. So this is something that we are going to see it regardless. Now, where we are standing as policymakers, as where West is, I think EU made a good decision of placing IRGC in the terrorist list. But there is still a lot to do that can be done without costing the taxpayers any penny, or any American soldiers who lose his or her life. We don't need anyone from Ohio or from Florida or Virginia to go and do the fight. If we have these concrete decisions and policies, what can be the policies? It's very clear. Ask our allies to shut down all Iranian embassies and all the attaché, cultural, religion attaché to the Iranian regime, and expel every single one of them. They know who the lobbyists are that they work in. If we have at least three lobby firms that right now they work and live in the United States. We have two offices, Iranian offices, that are open right now in Washington, D.C. and in New York. One is the intersection of Iran, which is in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., and one in New York, which is the UN office. Why are they here? If we are done with them, expel them. And there are many kids, families, relatives of the Iranian regime officials that they are threatening Americans and America right now. Their kids are living in the United States. They are going to schools to get their PhDs, or they have businesses here, or they've been living here. Why are they here?
All
Throw
right,
them out.
let me stop you there because I know Colonel McGinnis has things to say about what you've been saying so far. What would you like to, how would you like to reply to that?
Yeah, I would agree to get rid of a lot of the non-essential Iranian um, technical people, embassy people that are not necessarily here to represent their government in terms of negotiation with the U.S. And I'm sure Rubio at the State Department is aware of this. Having dealt with embassies in Washington for many decades, I understand how this works. But we can do a lot more than we have been. So that's a key issue. I think not only in the United States but across the Western world. Now, the Chinese are going to object, the Russians are going to object, other tyrants in the world will object just because they don't want their people treated like that. But that's a reality. We need to get tough with the Iranians, not only through the sanctions that Donald Trump has imposed, and I think that the next step likely will be something against the infrastructure. She mentioned IRGC. IRGC, of course, runs the economy. They have their fingers on the oil that's being produced, and of course, that's being sent to China, which keeps their coffers going. And of course, they're good friends with the North Koreans and, of course, the Russians because they, sell them a lot of the drone technologies which are used in the battlefield in Ukraine. So you have a host of these issues that, kind of resonate around the Ayatollah and his leadership at IRGC. Uh, you know, they will not be missed if, in fact, the Iranian people, as Shirin Sharon indicates, are going to rise up and overthrow. And I would hope, and I suspect this is true, that there are clandestine organizations in this country and other countries that will help Iranian insurgencies to, you know, be armed, to also have things like Starlink to get the word out to the rest of the world, to shut down GPS and EW, electronic warfare inside Iran, so that it can help those that are trying to resist the regime. I totally agree with the terrible record this regime has. It's just a matter of how this is going to happen. If it does happen organically, and certainly the West and the rest of the world that loves freedom is going to help those that are resisting the regime. So, that's probably something that we're going to do what we can on the side, but I do not expect Donald Trump's going to send us in there to, go after the Ayatollah and IRGC and the rest of the armed forces there.
Well, of
I
course,
think,
another problem is that Iran is already, they've already been calling in for soldiers to fight. It's my understanding, from like Iraq and some other countries to fight against the Iranians who rebelled against the regime.
well, what I can tell you is that, like, Hashad al-Shaabi from Iraq yesterday announced that they are not going to get involved in this. And
Who announced that?
Hashad al-Shaabi is a terrorist or an army in Iraq that
Mhm.
and have been fed by the Iranian regime. Now, all these groups like Fatemiyun, which were fighting in Syria before, and Hezbollah, they're getting money, funds from the Iranian regime through the IRGC networks, as the colonel just mentioned, that they are controlling the finance of Iran and the region. So if all these as assets are frozen, then there is no money to be distributed to them, and there is no one to, no one would work for free. No one would come kill for free.
Mhm.
So we have to cut all these financial uh, services that is coming and is feeding and is supporting these terrorist proxies. We have to stop that. And now that the EU put the IRGC in the list, now it's time to shut down all the banking system and all the front companies that do the business, and they do the money laundering for the Iranian regime. They have, and they know who they are, and we know. If we know, then definitely the secret services of each country knows exactly who's doing what. So they need to shut down everything. The whole world needs to make a decision that we are done with this regime, and we are not going to support them. Now, we talk about guns. I don't know how much you know about the foundation of Iran, but has different pockets of ethnicities, like Kurdish, like Baluchis, like Air, like Azaris, like Loristan. All these groups, these tribes, you want to call it, or ethnic groups, historically and culturally, they have guns. That's
Mhm.
one. Second, we do have lots of resistance units. National Council of Resistance has thousands and thousands of resistance units inside of Iran that they have been trained. And we are seeing it in the footages that even in the recent uprising, there were groups that they would attack the IRGC forces or Basijis, disarm them, and take their arms with them.
Mhm.
So it's really now to a point that the world has to make the final decisions that, you know, people of Iran fed up. So many thousands and thousands of people have lost their lives.
Well,
I mean,
yes. I mean, but that's what I was going to say. So why, if there are these guns and so on, how come, why weren't they able to in this so far? I heard the numbers that I'm familiar with is 40,000, that 40,000 Iranians were killed by the regime. Now, that's just what I've read in my research, but anyway, it's a lot of people. And so why is it that how do you think that, what else has to happen? Like what hasn't happened yet to give power to the Iranians for them to win?
I think because the West still thinks that maybe having this regime would still benefit because probably they are concerned about Russia and Turkey, but and also they haven't come around to recognize the true alternative to the Iranian regime. We have National Council of Resistance of Iran that we believe there's a true alternative. Just this past weekend on Saturday in Berlin, we had the rallies that thousand and thousand, according to Reuters, about 100,000 people gathered in support of the National Council of Resistance from different groups, from multiple groups. We have National Council of Resistance, which is like a united front of different ethnic groups and personalities and organizations that have come together. I think it's time for the West and for the White House or Secretary Rubio to really start paying attention of who the true alternative is and who has done what. Listen, we've been fighting for over 4 decades, over 40 years. I was arrested when I was only 16 in 1980. I have witnessed people were taken for executions and they would chant, and at that time chant death to Khomeini. The same thing that we are seeing now, that people are chanting immediately death to Khomeini. So Iranian people have been fighting for past 4 decades. Unfortunately, it's the war that has always come short of supporting the Iranian people. And we think that this is the time. This is the
Okay,
time that they need to.
let's ask Colonel McGinnis about this.
Dr. Carole, I reflected back in the beginning of the Iraq War, and there were all sorts of yeah, groups that are outside of Iraq at the time that were trying to get the United States to help their particular group and their leader to go back to Baghdad and take over. I worked at the very top, meeting with the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld. Talked to all the generals and so forth, and we made some bad decisions. Now I have a lot of confidence in Marco with regard to his diplomacy skills, his understanding of people, and I would hope that, as Shirin indicates, that there are some alternatives out there. Often, however, the alternative that has been living in the West in a comfortable life, uh, going back and trying to lead people that have been resisting, as she indicates, for the last 45 years, is often not very well received.
Mm.
And so that's why I say this needs to be as much as organic as it can be. The political inroads, in Iraq were just horrendous, and it wasn't helpful that the Iranians were directly involved in trying to undermine what we were trying to do and what the Iraqi, freedom-loving people were trying to do. So it's far more complicated than we in the West may want to, say. Now, with regard to individual weapons that are, part of every ethnic group in Iran, no question about that. It's a matter of how organized they are and how they can, orchestrate their firepower against a very well-equipped, a very well-trained IRGC and some of the other militias that are supporting the regime. So you have all of these issues. Now, I think behind the scenes, as I indicated before, the West will help these groups if they show the inclination to actually bring power against what the regime is doing and try to resist. However, if they're not going to do that, then much like when we helped the Mujahideen in Afghanistan or Pakistan to fight against the various groups in Pakistan and Afghanistan years ago, we got the Russians to leave. and we only work through insurgents. And I think that, I can't say with certitude because I'm not directly involved in what the intelligence agencies do right now, but I know how they work. And so it would be very surprising if we're not shipping uh, various types of capabilities to those groups, either along the border or they have to go outside the border and bring them in. So these are the types of things, if you want an organic takeover of a regime, you have to have in place capability and you have to have leadership that's ready to do that. And I don't know, it's a 90 million person, country. Do you have uh, a leader or a group of leaders that can bring them all together? Perhaps the National Council of Resistance has those people identified inside. I don't know for sure, but that's something they need to do. And if and then I think the United States can provide some help, diplomatic help with the neighborhood. Uh, and of course, work with the Chinese and the Russians who do not want to see this happen. But I think that we can be helpful in that regard as well.
Okay. Um, well, we'll take a break now since this seems to be a natural pause. And when we come back, I would like to also talk about the role of Israel in all of this. I mean, Netanyahu is getting concerned that well, I mean, it's just very tricky when there are all these different people who have their own interests, and of course, the safety, the security of Israel is Netanyahu's number one concern. So we can talk a little bit about that when we come back. My guests again are Colonel Bob Magninnis and Shireen Nariman. I'm sorry
Anyway,
for
you're doing good. Yeah, we get you.
Shireen and Bob.
Yeah.
We're all friends now. Let's just say that. People can see your
Okay.
name on it. And when we come back, we'll talk more about this. And also, I want to get to, before the end, I want to get to Bob's book about AI being saving the world from World War III and destruction. So we'll be right back. So stay tuned. And welcome back to Dr. Carol's Couch. We're talking about while everyone's looking for Nancy Guthrie, Iran is threatening World War III. And my guess, again, well, at the end, we're going to be talking about AI for Mankind's Future, which is Colonel Bob McGinnis's new book. And we're talking with Shirin Nariman, who had an amazing story of, I keep thinking, you look so put together today. And I know you've been working very hard on the causes that you were working on when you were a child, to save Iran basically from the regime. And so it's you suffered so much. Um, One thing I want to mention is because this is what I focus on a lot as the terrorist therapist is that in America, first of all, so many Americans are they're so complacent, really. And you would think the women their group of women, white college educated women are the ones who are most likely to have Trump derangement syndrome and the ones who are out there now in Minnesota and protesting and everything else. So like they're very they're very woman, like they're the military feminists, feminists. Now, why aren't they worried about the women in Iran who are suffering under this regime? We don't hear anything. We don't even, not just the women. We don't hear anything about the people who have been killed, approximately 40,000. Where is everybody in America? Why aren't they protesting like they did for Palestine and for Hamas and all that? So it's a very and so the thing that concerns me the most is that I don't think people here understand. In addition to all that, I don't think they understand what drives the Iranian regime and other terrorists. Um, it's not about money. It's not about land. It's about their religion. They are willing to be martyrs. They're willing to die. They want to die to some degree. If they're dying in a way to be a martyr, because it's all about getting approval and getting rewards from Allah. And in America, we don't really think about that so much. We think about the more tangible things like money and land and things like that. We miss it. That what they're really all about is the religion. Of course, it's death to America, death to Israel, because we are the infidels. So I don't know who would like to start first. Who wants to start this segment?
Well,
Well, you were saying about go ahead.
yeah, I just want to respond to what the colonel said earlier, that, about coming up with, what happened in Iraq. What I want to clarify that we are not, I mean, National Council of Resistance of Iran. We don't want Chalabi like, change in Iran, because we don't want any money. We are not asking for any money. We are not asking for any weapon. We are not asking for any um, put on the ground. We are asking for a third option. The third option is really political decision and political will to support the entity that has the roots inside of Iran and has been fighting for over 4 decades for the freedom, democracy, non-nuclear, democratic, secular Republic of Iran. So, and that's what we are asking. We do not believe that the West, anyone can create or find or choose a leader for us. Iranian people are well capable of forming the uh, one unifying front and pick the next leader of Iran. That's why we believe that the leadership comes from Iran, within from Iran, and that's what I think the whole world and the West needs to recognize it and accept it and allow Iranian people, and also to support Iranian people for the fighting back with the regime. Self-defense, that's very important, that people, when they are fighting back the regime, they are not called out as a terrorist or anything, but they are being called out as a freedom fighters, or a member of the National Liberation Army. That's what basically people are inside of Iran fighting the regime.
Okay, Colonel.
Yeah, Dr. Carole, yeah, I agree with what Sharon's saying. The Persian people have a rich history, very intelligent people. They're very different than the people on the other side of the Gulf. Um, the political decisions that were made in the U.S. government vis-a-vis Iraq in 2002, 2003, and Sharon had mentioned the problems that we had with certain personalities that were able to get into positions of influence within the U.S. government and cause things to happen that, frankly, that I disagreed with. And the Iraqi exile community that I worked with was very upset about that, because they knew that you know, uh, these people were not doing it for the right reasons. And so I think it's critical at this point. And I do have great confidence in Marco and his the team. I know Pete Hegseth, and I know the team there at at state, and I have confidence that Mr. Trump will listen to these people. It's a matter of how the exile community from Iran are going to work with U.S. government and with other allied governments to help them as best as we can. And like I say, we're not going to, as Sharon says, we're not going to put boots on the ground, but we can, create the setting, the deterrence that will help them to do the organic takeover of that government. And we can provide other types of assistance, whether diplomatic or even electronic capabilities that they won't have domestically. So this is possible. However, my concern, like I said before, is I'm not sure that they're getting to the right people in Washington, and frankly, it's Washington. I wouldn't be as concerned about London or Paris or some of these other places because their capabilities aren't anywhere close to what we could do if we decide to help more than we are. But at the same time, encouragement does not mean necessarily the U.S. is going to do a lot more than it's already done unless it has confidence of what the outcome might be. And we, I think, collectively in the U.S. government want a peaceful Iran. We don't want them, bombing Tel Aviv. We don't want them helping the Houthis. We don't want them taking over Syria and Lebanon and being unhelpful in Baghdad. They have been a sore spear in the side of the entire Middle East for 45 plus years. So that needs to be over. And I think President Trump, is ready to do what he can, but he can only do so much until we have great confidence that there is an alternative to the regime in Tehran.
So, how do you see Israel playing into all of this at this sort of breaking point right now?
Well, they have a lot of capability. I think that their clandestine operations are probably the best. We don't need to have more uh, missiles going from one direction to another across Saudi Arabia in the near future. I think there are subtle things that can happen. And you mentioned my book AI. I think there are certain things that we can use that for, and the Mossad has already used, I would argue, some of that capability, but we don't talk about a lot of that. There are things that need to happen in order to set up for the fall of the Ayatollah, the IRGC, and so forth. Now, are we going to end up with a Jeffersonian democracy in Tehran in the near future? I don't think so. However, it's going to be something, I hope, much better than it is, that can get along with its neighbors and treat its people appropriately. That's, I think, reasonable. And I would hope that Sharon and the organization she's associated with can be instrumental in causing that organic uprising to topple this regime. And then we can provide further assistance to help accelerate that transition.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about AI and your book?
Well, I've actually, this in November, this book came out. It answers the question, what is AI? I have another one coming out in April that answers the question, who controls AI? And a third, where does AI take us ultimately? So there's a trilogy there. But I'll talk about AI for mankind's future because it's like electricity. It's transforming the world in ways that most of us have never understood. It's much more pervasive and going to be more influential than even the internet was in the early 90s. Now, over the next couple of years, not only is it going to challenge most every uh, job site because we're going to have AI assistants that are going to pop up, especially in the where there's in the legal realm, in the medical realm, in the certainly the uh, industrial realm, you name it. There's very little today among the nearly 700 million users of artificial intelligence in the world that it's not going to have a direct impact. And my concern is that it's a formative type of a capability. It's starting to change our minds in ways that are dangerous.
Hmm.
Specifically, it's addressing our judgment. It's addressing the whole issue of wisdom. It's addressing the whole issue of confidence. When you talk to an AI entity today, whether it's an agent or a simple GPT, it's very confident. It does make mistakes, though, and yet we become over reliant upon it. And so, I'm not an Elon Musk or a Eric Schmidt or a Sam Altman. Those are, sort of the icons of the AI world. What they're promising are things that are theological in terms of where it's going to take mankind. I don't think it should be viewed that way, but it will be viewed that way. And there's even an AI religion out there in Silicon Valley that I write about, an AI for mankind's future. So there are issues that are associated directly with artificial intelligence that are transforming the world. It's transforming the battlefield, and I kind of hinted at some of that with what the Israelis are doing, but certainly the Russians are doing it. The Ukrainians have done an incredible job of tethering drones with AI and being able to reach deep inside Russia and go after their strategic capabilities. But it's being used in other ways, especially by the Chinese, who arguably are even ahead of us in certain areas of artificial intelligence, and especially with regard to the delivery of kinetic activities. In other words, their warfighting capabilities. So there's so much to this that, which is why I wrote three books rather than one, because, I could talk about the retail industry or, the production industry of the raw material from an AI perspective all day, much like I could talk about the medical views and, how it's really accelerating our ability to read CT scans or X-rays, the pharmaceutical industry, you name it. The list is long and incredibly encouraging. It even reads DNA in a way that we would never have thought about only a couple of years ago. And it's going to help us, I think, to not only anticipate the arrival of certain types of diseases given our understanding of a person's DNA, but it's going to allow us to stop that reaction in ways that are going to allow us to live longer. So there, like I say, there's so much to it that we'd have to kind of categorize it and talk about all of the various pieces and then how it eventually comes together.
Yeah, well, as a psychiatrist, I do have some, I mean, I think all these things, could be great, especially living longer. Um, but and certainly losing less men, less soldiers, in
Yeah.
wars, that's amazing. Um, but I worry about the impact that it's going to have on people's psyche because
Oh,
it's just hard to get one's head around. There was something
right,
that I just saw on the internet today of a what did they call it? It was like a robot, but they didn't call it a robot. But it was like a person. It looked like a person, and it was a robot. It was an
right.
AI. What do they call that? It was like and
A
the person.
drone?
Well, it wasn't a drone, no, but it was like a model kind of thing, walking in the street,
Yeah,
and
it's
people were
okay.
co
It's a robot. Yeah,
and
there
people
are
were
various
coming up
terms.
to it and talking with it,
Right,
and the face was so human-like,
right.
It, it, this is scary stuff, but also, I mean, I guess it's the good with the bad. I guess we have to read your book. Well, unfortunately, we don't have more time today to do any of these things, but this has been a really fascinating conversation. We just solved the whole US Iranian war in 1 hour here. Um, so again, the book that Colonel McGinnis has written, the first of the trilogy, is AI for Mankind's Future. Um, and Shirin Nariman, um, I compliment you for your continued work and your first of all your survival and your continued work on behalf of the Iranian people. So thank both of you. And I do want to say just that yes, I think that America is very fortunate to have Trump as president. If or we would be in wars right now. This is, I mean, he is our hope for solving not only the problem with Iran, but lots of other problems around the world.
Right.
So thank you so much for being on Dr. Carol's Couch, and thank you all for listening. You've been listening to Dr. Carol's Couch, and